Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar called What to Do If I'm Not Working. This is part one of a two-part webinar where we're going to be talking today about before and during the gap. These webinars are part of the Boost Your Career webinars co-sponsored by Sue Mentors and Tulane University. Today you'll be hearing from me, Sue Griffey, also known as Sue Mentors. When we think about a job or a career gap, there's a lot of different reasons why this happens. Things that may be fun to think about are joyous: time for travel, you're getting a degree, move to a new location, caring for family members, other family or personal situations, maybe caretaking for family members. You might have been let go in a reorganization or because a funded project is over, or even maybe had a personal illness. I've grouped these into two categories. One is the planned gaps that you might have and the unplanned gaps that you might have. And the kinds of things I just mentioned, I've put them under each of the categories. Keep this in mind, and I'll be showing you these again as we go through this in the next webinar to talk about what can you do about the gap when you're in it, and then what do you do in terms of talking about it and acknowledging it in your resume and CV, and especially for those moving on to different jobs. So let's start with what we can do before and during. The big thing here is you're going to make a plan to keep your career brain engaged. And by that I mean you need to plan for your personal professional care. Most of the planned gaps, you can plan for what you need to do: work coverage if you're on family leave, extended time away from the office, sabbatical, extended vacation, or other reason to take some time off. You can say to people, I need you to cover this, or I'll take care of this before I leave. But you also need a plan to get your own professional career care focused on your career, continued to move along. So you're going to make sure that people at your office know you're leaving and tell them what the plans are, depending on whether it's a colleague, your boss, or just generally to coworkers. And remember, this isn't just a reply on your email saying you're out of office. It's got to be more thoughtful than that. There might be other ways that you want to let people know you're moving along on something. For example, extended travel. What I suggest that you do is make a plan also to have your own personal professional care as part of what you're doing. In this case, I've shown you on the right, someone has an annual calendar in Excel. They've blocked out the whole section of when they're actually going to be away. The A stands for away. And they left it with their boss, their friend, their colleagues, whoever needed to know about it. On the right, though, is the calendar that you may not show anybody at work, but this is a commitment you're making to yourself to try to catch up. And it's a minimal commitment, but it's a commitment that even though you're taking a gap and you have other things that are planned during that gap, you are going to try to keep up with what your career is, what's happening in the world technically, and even consider sharing updates. One of the things that people forget about, especially if you've been working in a very busy project or an initiative where you've been really focused on one specific, maybe more narrowly focused topic at your job, is the world of electronic newsletters that can give you a view to what's going on in the field you work in. For me, it's public health and development and also evaluation. So here's some resources that I could sign up for to make sure that I'm getting evaluation newsletters. The reason that you want to think about newsletter subscriptions is that this is what's called a push technology. It comes to you, you don't have to do anything. It's pushed out to you, as opposed to a pull technology like LinkedIn where you have to remember to go to that. So you want these newsletters coming in, but you also want to make sure that you have a personal professional email, that you're not using just your work email for everything in your life. You can see on the right, I have several different emails, and I separate out my work email, which is Sue Mentors, where I do my mentoring, from my personal email. And my Sue Griffey email is what actually is where all my professional newsletters go. Make sure you understand the importance of this, because some companies do not even allow you to be on your work email if you're on, for example, a family, you've taken FMLA, family and medical leave time, or if you're on disability. But you also don't want the temptation to deal with urgent work emails or catching up, because the whole reason for your gap is a non-work employment reason. The habit that, or the information that I gave you a couple slides ago, was on making a commitment to a time. And in this case, I showed you 2 days a week from 8 to 8:30. This person was going to update LinkedIn, read through Twitter, look at the newsletters. If you can make a habit of LinkedIn, and this is something that you'll see in the effective networking webinar that we've did earlier. Here are some recipes to follow. You only have to spend 5 minutes a day on LinkedIn, even less, 2 to 3 times a week. And when you're out there, maybe like 3 to 4 things colleagues have put up. Because what you want to not have happen is to have a big gap of not engaging on LinkedIn or in other platforms. You want to be seen as somewhat engaged, but you don't have to spend a lot of time writing status updates or doing other things. That's not the goal of your gap, but it is an opportunity for you to see sort of what's going on and feel like your career brain has continued to stay engaged. If you're a Twitter user, make sure you use Twitter lists. You'll see on the bottom right of the screen, this is my set of lists, and I circled one on eval where I showed you a recent set of tweets. So I see, oh, if I get on the eval list, I can see Stephanie published a new article, which is great. She's got a great blog every week. Oh, there's some interesting jobs there. Maybe I know someone. But again, you can scroll through this in 3 to 5 minutes a day. You don't have to get through everything in Twitter, depending on how many followers you have. The important thing is to make it a commitment. Note that there are, at the bottom left here, you will see a bit.ly link and slide reference numbers, slide and timing reference numbers to slides in the Effective Networking webinar that also discuss this. Really important, a before step is to find a short-term mentor. The reason for this is that you have another reason for your gap, and you are planning. If it's family leave, you're probably planning either how your house is going to change or buying new wardrobes or whatever care needs to be arranged for. If you're traveling, you're already thinking about where you're going off to. This is a person who can help give you their help, but also be your external accountability. So there are programs. I mentor for both Rollins School of Public Health and for Tulane University. Tulane lets you sign up as a mentor or to be a mentee, and there's also another avenue at Tulane, and I believe other universities have it. In fact, I believe my undergraduate one also has something like this. Is called Tulane Connect, and one of the big features there is not just who's in the directory and who can I network with, but they actually say, we'll help you find a mentor. And these are people that have voluntarily signed up on Tulane Connect to give advice, feedback, whatever, to other alums. Some work situations have mentoring programs, like the one at the bottom left is an example of something from the Department of Energy. You may or may not want to have a work-related email, but if your office is or your organization is large enough, there may be someone there that you could work with that isn't directly in the line of the work you're doing, so it would feel more like an external mentor. And then in the middle bottom, I showed you a Google search where I actually found a couple of programs that are specifically for people in a certain area, fundraising or statistics, and they say their objective is short-term job-related mentoring. The reason I emphasize short-term is this is not something that you need a lot of work on. You're going to need the help to update some things, but mostly to have an external perspective, someone who can listen to you, give you time and feedback on what you're writing and what you're saying as you talk about the gap and how it fits into your overall career. Also, don't forget that you've got colleagues past and present. Someone reached out to me a few weeks ago. I had worked with her a decade and a half ago, and she felt that I might be able to help her in a new job search that she was working forward on. And also check out the webinar called No Reply Is Anyone Out There that we did have done already, which will show you also about some of the opportunities that you can use for mentoring and ways that mentoring can help you. All right, so what happens in the case where you don't have time to plan, what we call the unplanned situations? Well, the first thing you're going to do is just take some time to breathe, because the unplanned ones are really disruptive initially, and you need that time to do whatever it is that's causing the gap, whether it's caretaking, your own illness, a reduction in the workforce causing you to be let go in a group of people, whatever it is. And then you're going to go back to all the things we just talked about for planned, but you're going to try to set your priorities and make realistic plans. Maybe you think the only thing you can really do is catch up twice a week on some newsletters and on LinkedIn, and that's all you can do. That's just fine. It doesn't matter exactly what you choose. The idea is to choose something and do it to the extent that you can. So let's turn now to the during situation. What can you do during the gap? At some point in the gap, you're going to start turning more outward from what your gap is focused on, and you're going to focus on your career and work. So you want to get back in the driver's seat. That is giving you a chance to take control. And that's going to start there with updating your professional documents, CV, resume, and then your electronic visibility, the presence you have, which is usually LinkedIn, maybe other places. So here's the big question everybody has in all the reading that I've done and in this talk that I went to a few years ago. I really like how Pamela Weinberg said this when she presented at Tulane's Women Making Waves conference in 2016. She said, resume gap, acknowledge it and move on. And I thought that's great advice. It's very positive. And if you want to see how that looks, here's two people that I know. And in the red, I've highlighted for their work history in terms of the dates. And you can see that there are some that are not contiguous there. And they've just put them in there. The way to explain it is when you explain it in writing or orally, depending on you're moving along in a job or you're trying to get a promotion within your job, your present employment situation, how would you explain it? What would you do? But the gap is there. You can't hide it. One caution I have is that there are people that are writing information about how to acknowledge a gap, and they're saying do not put yourself down just as a general consultant for a period of time. And I circled that in green on the left because this person I happen to know actually worked for a variety of clients, and she should have put the clients up there that she worked for. But I also had the person who contacted me a few weeks ago, I just mentioned I had worked with her a decade and a half ago. She said to me, I feel like I need to, I lost my job as of the 30th of June, and so I feel like I need to put that I'm a consultant. And I said, well, maybe you are going to consult, but right now you're not doing it. So if you want to be ethical about it, I would not put it up there. And I gave her what I just said to you. Generally, people are not recommending that. If you are consulting for a specific business, that's great. And I did consult for over 10 years and had a long list of consulting jobs. That's fine. But you don't just list it the way this green circle shows that says independent, and I did it for a year and 10 months. And by the way, there's nothing describing what I did there. So time to update. What does this mean? Well, the first thing we usually think of, oh, maybe I'll get a new haircut. Oh, some new clothes. This is my new professional self now I'm updating. So think about this, even if you're going back to the same job, as updating what you are and where you're going. So I have two blurred first pages of CVs and resumes here. The one on the left is one that's been in vogue for a while, using little icons for your phone number and your email and other kinds of things. And this happens to be for global health, and she showed countries she's worked in. But none of that's going to pass the resume scanner scanning systems, or what they call ATS, applicant tracking systems. Stay tuned for a webinar on that that's going to come soon, that you'll hear more on what does it mean to use these systems. The basic message is keep formatting clean and to a minimum. Don't do any fancy icons, don't do fancy colors, don't do anything that's going to distract the computer scanning AI from the key information. So we'll talk more about that, but that's why you don't want to go into a fancy formatted kind of resume. In addition, for me, that resume also has topic sections that don't mirror what a scanning system is looking for, but also don't necessarily help the person in terms of where they want to try to emphasize their story. The whole goal of your resume is not to show all your jobs, but it's to do not to make someone else do your work for you. You need to tell your story. And on the right, in the red boxed area, is what I call a biopara, which is the weaving together of all of your experience and your skills into a story that helps describe where you've come from and helps you with where you're aiming to go. You'll see a bit.ly link web address at the bottom, which is actually a link to a little set of instructions I have, a recipe if you like, for 6 sentences how to write a biopara. It's worth the quarter or third of a page to get something up there that summarizes you and who you are. And it does allow you to tell your own story instead of making people construct the story from your reverse cron job titles. Make sure that then your resume has everything on the first page that's important. Your present job needs to be there. Any special kinds of education you may want to emphasize, but that could also be with your name and with the degrees there. The next thing to do is start working with your mentor. And this is the reason that you want to work with a mentor. A mentor can give you that external perspective. So the mentor can give you feedback on your written documents, which is great. Even more important, the mentor can help you rehearse how verbally and even in writing you're going to be talking about your gap. I tried to write a sample script that took into account some advice that I give to people. So let's see if I've hit all of the advice here. First of all, it's not who am I, it's you're talking to someone else. So is it about a position? Is it an informational meeting? Is it in a networking, or is it other outreach? And you can look at the effective networking or the no reply is anyone out there. Those two webinars both have examples of topics that are useful on how you reach out to people for meeting with them or getting their feedback. Then you use the beginning of your biopara. Oh, that's what that helps me with. Oh, by the way, this is who I am. And here's a statement that says I focused on things, but it's also a statement that shows your results. I focused on merging evaluation, analytics, and processes that improve efficiencies. I can see right away, oh, her expertise, where she said she's a business analyst and evaluation advisor. Oh, I get it now. And then she goes into her gap. She doesn't start with, oh, poor me, I, left my job. It was her timing was over. I left whoever it was 3 months ago. but you don't just say I've left them. You say I've continued to stay engaged. I've stayed engaged in my evaluation work, or in her case, she's moving into business efficiency processes. And then you talk about not just your gap, but what have you engaged in and what have you done? I recently gave a presentation. I'm also an active member of a chapter of a university or an organization. A local business org is a good thing to belong to. I've also continued my weekly civic work. That usually implies volunteer work or some kind of volunteer thing, and you say what you did. So you now have buried the gap in saying, yes, I've been gone for 3 months, but look what else I've been doing in addition to the experience I've had. So hopefully this has given you a good idea of what you do before and during the gap, and how we're going to approach this in all the different gap situations that I reviewed at the beginning of this webinar. This is now leading on to the next webinar, part 2. But just in summary, what have we talked about here? First thing to remember, don't worry about the gap. I love the mind the gap, and I adapted something from British Railway. Don't mind the gap, just get it out of your mind, move on. Make time in the bottom left corner, make time for your own personal professional care, and really think seriously about getting a short-term mentor, even if it's just talking to some person once, because that mentor is going to provide help, motivation, and accountability at a time that you're probably going to welcome someone helping jump in and help you get back in the groove again for you to get back to work. Thanks again for attending. A reminder to watch part 2 of this webinar. It's called Tips and Scripts for Reentry or Continuing a Career Gap. Don't forget to check this channel for the many other Boost Your Career webinars, as well as other professional development seminars from the Tulane Alumni Career Services. And you can always contact Sarah or me, Sue, for more information on this topic or any other ideas about a webinar you'd like. Thanks.